Well, good morning, church. So good to be here, and we kind of say that, but it really is good to be here. And I love being your pastor, and I love preaching God's word, even when we come to a hard passage that we're going to come to and look at here this morning in a moment. Back many years ago now, ABC News reported on an unusual work of modern art where a shotgun was affixed to a chair and people would sit in the chair facing the barrel of the shotgun. They would look directly into the barrel. The gun was loaded and set on a timer to fire at an undetermined moment within the next 100 years. Now, if you knew that gun could go off at point-blank range at any moment, and you would have that, you gamble a fatal blast that would happen during your minute in the chair, would you sit in that chair? Right. And yet, so many people look into the shotgun barrel of sin, hoping to walk away unscathed. We look today at a man's 1 minute in the chair. And only while he's in it, the gun does go off. And so look with me at 2 Samuel chapter 11. 2 Samuel chapter 11, to a very familiar story as we continue in our summer sermon series on the life of David, man after God's own heart. Now, if I were to play with you this morning the word association game and ask what is the first thing that comes to your mind when I mention King David, many of you would answer Bathsheba. If it weren't the first thought that came to your mind, it would be second to David and Goliath. 2 Samuel chapter 11 records for us David's darker side. Now, we've seen that David would win battle after battle. It seemed like every time he stepped into combat, he won the battle and walked off the field as a victor. But there was one battle he didn't win. He was decisively defeated by a battle much bigger and more powerful than a giant. You see, our greatest battle in life is a moral battle. It isn't the battle of sickness, or the battle of suffering, or the battle of difficult people, or the battle of demands at work, or any other external battle that you think could possibly take you down. Rather, it's the battle within the human heart. The giant of some internal struggle or area of temptation is what will cause you the greatest trouble in life. You see, our greatest battle in life lies in the capability of our own hearts. That's the bottom line for this morning. I want to give that to you up front. Our greatest battle in life lies in the capability of our own hearts. And that's where we're going today. And so look with me in your Bibles at 2 Samuel chapter 11 as we watch David fight the battle of his life. And here are the stages of the battle. He saw, he sent, he slept, he covered up. He saw, he sent, he slept, he covered up. Those are the stages. And that's really my outline for this morning. First of all, stage one, he saw. He saw. Now, as we come to verse 1 of 2 Samuel chapter 11, and this true account in David's life, he's likely around 50 years old. And before I read verse 1, let me give you a little more context. You might recall from last week's sermon and 2 Samuel chapter 7 that David was living in a cedar-lined palace. It was a time of great success. Things were going well for David. His fame had spread. His reputation of being a distinguished warrior was growing. He was triumphing over all of his enemies. David at this time, as we come to 2 Samuel chapter 11, was at the pinnacle of power. I mean, pretty heady stuff. And if you took the time to read 2 Samuel chapter 7, that section there that I was only able to touch on last week, you would have seen at the end of 2 Samuel chapter 7 a magnificent prayer of David. It was a prayer of gratitude and a prayer of thanks. Now this, 2 Samuel 11, verse 1. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. Now, before this scene, David had always gone out into battle with his men. This time, David remained in Jerusalem. Now, perhaps much can be made of this. Certainly, sermons and books written on the subject of temptation, and particularly sexual temptation, tend to camp right there. I can still hear the sweet elderly church lady where I grew up, her voice, and she would say, "You know, an idle mind is the devil's workshop." Meaning, of course, that when you're sitting around doing nothing, you are then more likely to get into some trouble. I get it. But I don't know about you, but my heart can find trouble whether I'm idle or busy. So whether or not we want to make something of David remaining in Jerusalem rather than going off to war is not really relevant to what takes place. One thing's for sure. If David was on the battlefield with his men, he would not have ended up in bed with this woman. At least it wouldn't have happened right here. But the truth of the matter is, if we don't face the battle within, what's in the heart, then it will show its ugly face at some point, whether it's here or another time. For David, it all happened one evening. This regrettable incident is recorded for us in a rather matter-of-fact way. Look with me at verse 2. You need to follow along here. Verse 2, one evening, or some translations say late one afternoon. One evening, David sat on his couch and he flicked through the many channels on his TV. He checked to see what was on Netflix. David sat at his desk and he browsed the internet. One evening, David got up from his bed and he walked around on the roof of the palace. Walked around on the roof. Now, kids, don't try this at home. It was a flat-roofed house. Why is he walking on the roof? Well, perhaps he's taken this stroll because he can't sleep. Perhaps he goes on the roof simply to breathe in his success. He looks out at all that he has built and a nation that's united and an economy that is strong. He's up on the roof. And I can't help myself but think of the words of Carole King. I think James Taylor sang it also. At night the stars put on a show for free, and darling, you can share it all with me. Right smack dab in the middle of the town, I found a paradise that's trouble-proof up on the roof. Quite the opposite for David. What may feel like a moment of paradise and trouble-proof will actually be a minute in the chair sitting down the barrel of a loaded shotgun. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But as David is looking out from his rooftop, he not only saw the kingdom he ruled and the kingdom he reigned over. It says in the middle of verse 2, from the roof he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. Now, literally, it says in the Hebrew text order, beautiful of appearance, very. Very. Now, as we make our way through the case of a bathing beauty, a true account in David's life, we've got lots of questions. There's so much that isn't said that it invites speculation. And to speculate is fine, usually harmless, but we must call it what it is, speculation. And right here we wonder, did David know this was this woman's common practice to bathe shades open? Had he seen her before bathing, and his strolling on his roof on this particular night was only putting himself in this place of temptation? I mean, maybe. This and other questions like it make for good conversation. Why is she bathing out in the open? Why didn't she close her curtains? Was she flaunting her beauty? Was she trying to entice David? Was she part of the problem here? How much is this woman to blame? Now, certainly, ladies, what you choose to wear can make things more difficult for guys. You can dress beautifully and modestly at the same time. Dress to please the Lord. And while immodesty can be a contributing factor, listen, not for a moment is David a victim of circumstance. Not for a moment. His visual ignition switch is turned on. He saw a beautiful woman bathing and giving David the benefit of the doubt at this moment. It's only in the temptation stage, and temptation is not sin. He saw. What do you do with what you see? A wise driver said, he who looketh on a woman loseth a fender. Not bad. Well, David's about to lose more than a fender. He sent. He couldn't help seeing her, but he could have stopped himself from lingering. He could have pulled a Joseph here, got himself out, and run away. You see, sin is never inevitable. There's always a way out. Verse 3. And David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? In other words, this woman, the object of his obsession, has a name. She's someone's daughter. She's someone's wife. And these words here were words of warning. You don't want to do this, David. She's married to somebody else. And at this stage right here, David had a choice. Leave things alone or linger. Linger or flee. A businessman decided it was time to lose some weight, and he took his new diet very seriously, so he asked his co-workers to keep him accountable. He even changed his driving route to work to avoid his favorite bakery. One morning, however, he showed up at work eating a donut with more donuts in a bag to eat later. His co-workers questioned his lapse in judgment. He explained, I decided to drive by the bakery today, and I prayed, Lord, if you want me to have one of those delicious donuts, then let there be a parking spot in front of the bakery. Then he said, and wouldn't you know it, the 8th time around the block, there was an open parking space, right? You can't expect to linger and have it end well. The words of this servant didn't stop David. He's lingering. And David's obsession with her beauty and his lust for her obliterated all reason. Is there something you're obsessing about that's blurring your judgment right now? Did David really need another woman? At this time, he had 7 wives and 10 concubines. 17 women and not satisfied. I guess the more you have, the more you want. At this moment, as the giant of lust began to roar inside of him, he had a choice. But all David could think about, all that was on his mind, was Bathsheba. There's a story of 2 Buddhist monks. They're walking in a drenching thunderstorm. And they came to a stream, and it was swollen out of its banks, and there was a beautiful young Japanese woman in a kimono stood there wanting to get to the other side, but was afraid of the currents. And characteristic Buddhist compassion, one of the monks said, "Can I help you?" And the woman said, "Yeah, I need to cross this stream." Well, the monk picked her up, put her on his shoulder, carried her through the water, and put her down on the other side. He and his companion then went on to the monastery. Well, that night his companion said to him, I have a bone to pick with you. As Buddhist monks, we have taken vows not to look on a woman, much less touch her body. Back there by the river, you did both. The monk replied, "My brother, I put that beautiful woman down on the other side of the river. You're still carrying her in your mind." David's still carrying Bathsheba in his mind. And after David sends someone to find out about this bathing beauty, he sends others out to get her. He sends people jump. And again, we want to speculate here. Did David abuse his power? I think to some degree, David did use his position to get what he wanted. What do you use to get what you want? Clearly, David's in charge. He's in control, or so he thinks. His life is about to go out of control. See, part of our undoing is that we can't see it when it's happening. Part of our mess is that we can't see our mess. Things are about to get really messy for David. He saw, and he wanted her so badly, he sent for Bathsheba. Or he come to, he slept. He slept. Verse 4. Verse 4. Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. What has happened to David, our hero? David, what were you thinking? As Tom Sawyer would say to his aunt each time he gave into temptation, I wish I hadn't done it, but I didn't think. Yep. And notice the final words of verse 4. She went back home. She went back home. Talk about a moment of pleasure. It was a moment. The writer of Hebrews says the passing or momentary pleasure of sin. Now listen, it would be unrealistic to say that there was no pleasure in it. If sin wasn't pleasurable, then there would not be any magnetic pull towards it. Whether that's sexual sin or that word of gossip or indulging in spending or cutting someone down so you can feel better about yourself, there's some pleasure in that. Or binge eating or flexing your authority or drawing attention to yourself or getting drunk or desire for revenge or love of popularity, or whatever it is that you look to for satisfaction and fulfillment, there's the appeal there for pleasure, or it wouldn't be a temptation. A moment of pleasure. He sleeps with Bathsheba, then she goes back home. End of story. Simple, uncomplicated moment of pleasure. He might have thought, no one has to know about this, Bathsheba. This will be our little secret. Well, David's moment of pleasure and excitement will now be intruded by the real world. In the case of the bathing beauty, the pleasure wore off in just weeks. The only speaking part that's given to Bathsheba in this story is what we find at the end of verse 5 through a note when she says, I am pregnant. Powerful 3 words. Words that bring joy to many are words that turn David's world sideways. Actually, worse than that. He crashes. At the first stage, I doubt he ever considered the trouble he would be in. Husband and wife were shopping, and this beautiful woman walked by. And the husband's eyes followed that beautiful woman for several minutes as she walked down the aisle. His wife never looked up. With her head looking at an item of clothing in her hand, she says to her husband, was it worth the trouble you're now in? Was it worth, David, was it worth the trouble you are now in? What price are you willing to pay for a moment's pleasure? One writer said it this way, he said, the wise person checks on the destination before buying a ticket. Yet so many today buy the ticket without ever considering the horrendous pain that the price was too high. Do you know where you're headed? And it doesn't just apply to sexual temptation. In whatever area that you may feel particularly vulnerable, it'd be wise to rehearse the consequences before you speak that word. It'd be wise to rehearse the consequences before you send that email, before you quit your job in anger, before you lash out in retaliation, before you walk out on your marriage or indulge in your drug of choice, rehearse the consequences. Randy Alcorn says it that way in wise words. He says, when I feel particularly vulnerable to sexual temptation, I find it helpful to review what effects my actions could have. And these are words for any area you may feel particularly vulnerable. David doesn't review the effects his action would have. He could have taken a right turn right here rather than a wrong turn. He could have manned up. He could have turned to God. He could have had a conversation with Uriah. He could have. See, it's never too late to turn from your sin and turn to God. Even if you're far down the road, there's always an exit ramp. But as often the case, David applies a bad solution to his problem, and he only makes matters worse. David broke a couple of God's commandments. He's now trying to keep one of them. Thou shalt not be found out. It's not really one of them. He covered up. He covered up. Ever made a bad decision that led to more bad decisions? Moment of lust, David was obsessed with Bathsheba. Well, now he's obsessed with covering it up. And the longest section of this chapter is given to Operation Cover Up. And so allow me to do some of the heavy lifting here and give you kind of the flow of events that happen. I'm not going to read all that's here. It's likely a reminder to many of you, but I'd encourage you, if you haven't read it in a while, take some time and read through verses 6 through 27, and as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. Read those verses. All right, here's some of the things we're going to bring out. David arranges that Bathsheba's husband Uriah take the day off from battle and spend the night with his wife. In verse 8, David says to Uriah, this is Bathsheba's husband, he says to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. And you go, well, that's kind of strange. What's that mean? Well, the phrase really is a euphemism for settling in at home. We might say, kick your shoes off, relax with your wife. It might be more than that, but that's all I'm going to say about it right there. On the surface, though, it seemed like a nice gesture on David's part, right? Go home and spend a romantic evening with your wife, because I care about you. We know it's simply to cover up his sin. He just wants Uriah to sleep with his wife, think the baby is his, and all is good for David, no harm, no foul. It didn't work. Verse 9 tells us, verse 9, but Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go down to his house. Now, my mind gets a little active right here. I'm wondering, speculation here, I'm wondering if Uriah might have had an inkling of what happened. That the rumor mill might have found its way to Uriah, and he's going, I'm not letting David off the hook. Maybe. But whether he knew or not, one thing we do know is that Uriah did not spend the night with his wife. And when Uriah was questioned by David as to why he didn't go home to his wife, he tells him that since no one else gets to go home during battle to spend time with the family, why should I? He then says very interesting words here to David, end of verse 11. Get your eyes on the end of verse 11. He says, as surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Folks, that should have been David's line. I will not do such a thing. Uriah was a better man than David. Well, Operation Cover-Up's not going so well. David's now at a fork in the road once again. He could end all of this. He could make the right choice. But David sinks deeper. His second attempt to get Bathsheba's husband to sleep with his wife is to get Uriah drunk. Come on, Uriah, let's come over to the house. Hey, have some more wine. And so let me give you some more. I got some more for you. Verse 13. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. Nice guy. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. Uriah has more integrity drunk than David had sober. Again, right here, David can make the right choice. He doesn't things get worse. Uriah didn't provide David with the cover-up he wanted. So now David will make sure that Uriah is covered up with dirt 6 feet under. He sends a letter to his commanding officer Joab, and he says in verse 15, he says, put Uriah in the front line where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so he'll be struck down and die. That plan works. Word is passed on to David. Go down to verse 24. This is now they died. He's going to send word to David now. He says, then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. Do you see it? It wasn't just Uriah that died, but some other of David's closest men died also. Listen, we don't sin in isolation. There are rippling effects of one person's choice. People die. We see David's response in verse 25. It's shocking. He's saying this to Joab after the message was delivered to him about these people dying. He says this to Joab, verse 25. Don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. In other words, this stuff happens. People die in war. You win some, you lose some. Wow. How cold can you get? There's no remorse whatsoever. David covets another man's wife. He commits adultery with this man's wife. He commits murder. He lies to cover it all up. He breaks nearly half the commandments in one awful enterprise. Uriah is dead. All is good. David gets away with it. The sin is covered. Is it, though? The foolishness of trying to cover up our sin is well illustrated with the story of a drunk husband who snuck up the stairs quietly because he didn't want his wife to know. He looked in the bathroom mirror and he saw bumps and cuts and bruises from a fight he had received earlier, and so he started to bandage those bumps and bruises. He then proceeded to climb into bed, smiling at the thought that he'd pulled one over on his wife. When morning came, he opened his eyes, and there stood his wife. She said, "You were drunk last night, weren't you?" He asked, "How did you know?" "Well," she said, "if you weren't, then who put all the Band-Aids on the bathroom mirror?" Now, for some of you, you'll catch up with that later. You go, "Oh, yeah, no, I get it." Are you trying to cover up something right now? Think of it as putting Band-Aids on a mirror. What are you covering? See, our wrong thinking is that our sin only matters if somebody finds out. If my spouse doesn't find out, or the people in my office don't find out, or my boss doesn't find out, or my parents don't find out, all is okay. Yet even if we were able to keep it from everyone else, we still have one problem. And as you read through this story, 27 verses, something's missing. Why hasn't God chimed in? Punchline. End of verse 27. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. That's God's take on it. And it's his take that matters the most. What's happened to David? What began with a glance of a bathing beauty ended with the death of his servants on the battlefields. What began with one spring day up on the roof ended with a cold winter's heart toward God and others. Is your heart growing cold? Or are you in danger of your heart growing cold right now? And you may go, no, not me. This could never happen to me. My heart never grow cold like this. Here's the thing. What has happened to David can happen to you. can happen to me. I remind you of the bottom line. Our greatest battle in life lies in the capability of our own hearts. In the area where you don't think you're capable, you're one step closer to doing it. It may not be vulnerability to sexual sin, but seeds of wrongdoing live in our hearts. And if you don't look at those seeds, if I don't look at those seeds in my heart of what I'm capable of, then I've missed the point this morning. And you have too. What are the seeds? Those things that you're tolerating in your life. I mean, it might be sexual fantasies, but it might also be fantasies of revenge. It might be seeds of coveting another person's spouse, a real or imagined, or it may be coveting what others have. It may be seeds of jealousy, or seeds of envy, or seeds of self-absorption, or seeds of self-pity. Look for those seeds in your own heart this morning. Do you know what they'll become if they're watered? You see, stages of temptation begin with that hook. John Ortberg tells of the time he and his wife went fly fishing for the very first time. He said, our guides told us this. They said, to catch a fish, you have to think like a fish. They said that to fit a fish, life is about maximum gratification of appetite at the minimum expenditure of energy. They said to a fish, life is see a fly, want a fly, eat a fly. A rainbow trout never really reflects on where his life is headed. A girl carp really says to a boy carp, I don't feel you're really that committed to us in our relationship. And I wonder, do you love me for me or just for my body? The fish are just a collection of appetites. A fish is a stomach, a mouth, and a pair of eyes. Ortberg says that while we were on the water, I was struck by how dumb the fish are. Hey, swallow this. It's not the real thing. It's just a lure. You think it will feed you, but it won't. It will trap you. If you were to look closely, fish, you'd see the hook. You know once you were hooked that it's just a matter of time before the enemy reels you in. Ortberg then says this. He said, you'd think fish would wise up and notice the hook or see the line. You'd think fish would look around at all their fish friends who go for a lure and fly off into space and never return. But they don't. It's ironic. We say fish swim together in a school, but they never learn. Then he says, aren't you glad we're smarter? Aren't you glad we're smarter? Let's pray. Father, thank you for including us in your scriptures, and it's a tough go. There's a lot more we could talk about. And I'm glad we're ending with the song we're ending with this morning, because it reminds us that while we're trying to do something and kill those other passions and deal with those, we must remember we need to just do something with those passions inside of us to make them stronger for you. So as we sing, Give Me Jesus, give me Jesus. God, may you stir our hearts to grow our passion for you. For what better way to fight off all the temptation than to have a growing, close, loving relationship with you. So may the cry of our heart be, give me Jesus. We thank you in his name. Amen.